The rain was relentless, hammering the cracked pavement of a Baltimore alley where Ethan Cole, barely 18, shivered next to a dumpster. His clothes, soaked and clinging to his pale skin, were stuffed into a duffel bag, his only possessions after his parents threw him out. "Faggot," his father's voice echoed in his mind, sharp as the cold biting his fingers. Ethan's world collapsed in a single night. Yesterday, he was a high school senior with dreams of college, sneaking kisses with his boyfriend, Ryan, in the secrecy of his bedroom. Today, he was homeless, disowned for loving who he did. The alley reeked of rotting garbage, but the stench of betrayal hurt worse. He pressed his back against the brick wall, tears mixing with rain, wondering if he'd survive the night. He didn't know then that this moment, curled up beside trash, would be the crucible for a life he'd fight to reclaim. Ethan's story wasn't just about surviving. It was about proving them wrong. But first, he had to endure. The city was unkind to a kid with no money and no home. Ethan spent his first night under a tarp behind a diner, the hum of traffic his only companion. By morning, his stomach growled, but pride kept him from begging. He wandered into a shelter, where a kind-eyed volunteer named Maria handed him a hot coffee and a blanket. "You're not alone," she said, her voice steady. Those words stuck, a flicker of hope in the dark. Maria helped him find a cot and a job bussing tables at a greasy spoon downtown. The work was grueling, long hours, rude customers, but it paid enough for a shared room in a rundown boarding house. Ethan kept his head down, saving every penny, haunted by his father's parting words, "You're nothing without us." He'd prove them wrong, he swore, but the loneliness gnawed. Ryan had vanished after Ethan's parents caught them, too scared to face the fallout. Ethan didn't blame him, but it stung. Months blurred into years. Ethan worked his way up to waiter, then line cook, his hands calloused but his spirit unbroken. At 20, he enrolled in community college, juggling night classes with double shifts. He studied social work, driven by a need to help kids like him, lost, discarded, but not defeated. In the quiet moments, he dreamed of Ryan, his crooked smile, the way his laugh lit up the world. But Ryan was gone, and Ethan learned to live with the ache. One night, after a late shift, Ethan found a flyer for a local LGBTQ support group, pinned to a coffee shop bulletin board. He hesitated, then went. The room was warm, filled with voices, some broken, some defiant. There, he met Caleb, a lanky artist with soft blue eyes and a gentle laugh. Caleb was everything Ethan wasn't. Open, unashamed, proud. Their first conversation lasted hours, spilling into a diner over pancakes. At 2 a.m., Caleb spoke of painting, of freedom, of love without fear. Ethan felt something stir, a spark he thought had died. Their first date was a walk through Druid Hill Park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Caleb reached for Ethan's hand, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't flinch. "You're allowed to be happy," Caleb whispered, and Ethan believed him. They kissed under a canopy of red and gold, the world fading away. It was a moment of defiance against the past, a claim on a future Ethan hadn't dared imagine. But the past wasn't done with him. One evening, as Ethan and Caleb planned a weekend getaway, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your mom's sick. Come home." His heart stopped. He hadn't spoken to his family in 4 years, not since they'd left him in that alley. Caleb urged him to go, to face them, but Ethan wasn't sure he could. What do they want now? Forgiveness? Absolution? Or just another chance to hurt him? Ethan stood at the edge of his old neighborhood, the familiar row houses looming like ghosts. His mother's illness, cancer, the message said, pulled him back, but fear anchored him in place. He hadn't told Caleb everything. The bruises from his father's rage, the way his mother stood silent as he was thrown out. Could he face them again? Could he forgive? He knocked on the door, heart pounding. His sister, Lily, answered, her face a mix of shock and relief. "Ethan," she whispered, pulling him inside. The house smelled the same, lavender and old wood, but it felt colder. His mother, frail in a recliner, looked up. "You came," she said, her voice weak but warm. His father wasn't there. Lily explained he'd left years ago, unable to face his own shame. They talked for hours. His mother apologized, tears in her eyes, for not protecting him. Ethan wanted to scream, to demand why, but her fragility stopped him. Instead, he listened. She spoke of regret, of love buried under fear and prejudice. Lily, now a mother herself, begged him to stay, to rebuild. Ethan left that night, promising nothing, his heart a tangle of anger and hope. Back in Baltimore, Caleb held him as he cried, the weight of his family's rejection colliding with their tentative outreach. "You don't owe them anything," Caleb said, but Ethan wasn't sure. He wanted closure, Not just for himself, but for the kid he'd been, abandoned and scared. He didn't know then that closure would come in a way he never expected, or that it would involve a child who'd change everything. Ethan's life with Caleb became a quiet rebellion against his past. They moved into a small apartment in Charles Village, its walls covered with Caleb's vibrant paintings and Ethan's secondhand books. Each night, they cooked together, laughing over spilled sauce or burnt toast, building a home where love didn't need to hide. Ethan was 23 now, his social work degree nearly complete, his heart fuller than he'd ever thought possible. But the call from his family lingered like a bruise, tender and unresolved. One spring morning, Ethan received another text from Lily. "Mom's worse. Please come." He stared at the screen, torn. Caleb sat beside him, his hand steady on Ethan's knee. "You don't have to go alone," he said. They drove to the suburbs, the city fading into neat lawns and picket fences. Ethan's childhood home felt smaller, suffocating. His mother, thinner now, smiled weakly from her bed. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her hand reaching for his. Ethan took it, though part of him wanted to pull away. Lily hovered, her toddler son, Noah, clinging to her leg. The boy, barely 3, had Ethan's eyes, clear, searching. Ethan knelt, offering a shy smile, and Noah giggled, handing him a toy truck. For a moment, the room felt lighter. But then Lily spoke. "Dad's back." Ethan froze. His father, the man who'd called him worthless, was in town, wanting to make things right. Ethan's stomach churned. He wasn't ready. That night, back in Baltimore, Ethan couldn't sleep. Caleb traced circles on his back, listening as Ethan poured out years of pain. How his father's fists had taught him fear before love. How his mother's silence had cut deeper than words. What if he hasn't changed? Ethan asked, voice breaking. Caleb kissed his forehead. "Then you're still enough without him." Days later, Ethan met his father at a diner. The man looked older, lines etched deep in his face, but his eyes were the same, hard, unyielding. "I was wrong," his father said, voice gruff. "But you chose that life." Ethan's jaw tightened. It wasn't an apology. It was blame dressed up as regret. He walked out, heart pounding, knowing some wounds don't heal. Life moved forward. Ethan graduated, landing a job at a youth shelter. He poured himself into helping kids, runaways, outcasts, kids like he'd been. Caleb's art gained traction, his paintings selling at local galleries. They talked about the future, a house, maybe a dog. But Ethan's past kept pulling. Lily called again, desperate. Their mother was dying, and she wanted Ethan there. This time, he went alone. The hospital was sterile cold. His mother's breathing was shallow, her hand fragile in his. "I love you," she said, tears falling. "I should have fought for you." Ethan nodded, throat tight, forgiving her not for her sake, but for his own peace. She passed that night, and Ethan felt both loss and release. At the funeral, his father stayed distant, offering no words. Lily, though, clung to Ethan, begging him to stay in Noah's life. "He needs you," she said. Ethan promised to try. Back home, Ethan and Caleb faced a new challenge. The shelter where Ethan worked was stretched thin, and one night, a social worker called about a kid with nowhere to go. Jamie was 15, wiry and guarded, with pale skin and haunted eyes. He'd been kicked out for being gay, just like Ethan. Without hesitation, Ethan and Caleb took him in, turning their spare room into his. Jamie was quiet, distrustful, but Ethan saw himself in the boy's defiance. He and Caleb became a team, guiding Jamie through therapy, school, and the slow process of healing. Jamie's presence changed them. Caleb taught him to paint, his laughter filling the apartment. Ethan helped with homework, sharing stories of his own survival to show Jamie he wasn't alone. They weren't parents, not officially, but they were family. Ethan felt a purpose he'd never known, a chance to rewrite his own story through Jamie's. But the past wasn't done. One evening, Ethan found a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single line in his father's scrawl. "You're still a disgrace." Rage surged, then sorrow. He showed Caleb, expecting comfort, but Caleb was fierce. "He doesn't get to define you," he said, pulling Ethan close. They burned the letter in the sink, the flames a quiet vow to move forward. Ethan threw himself into Jamie's care, but questions lingered. Could he protect Jamie from the world's cruelty? Could he face his father again, not for reconciliation, but to prove he'd build a life worth living? As summer faded, Ethan knew answers were coming, whether he was ready or not. Summer in Baltimore was sticky, the air thick with humidity and possibility. Ethan, Caleb, and Jamie settled into a rhythm, their apartment a haven of laughter and late-night talks. Jamie, once withdrawn, began to open up, his sketches rivaling Caleb's in creativity. Ethan watched them paint together, feeling a warmth that dulled the ache of his family's rejection. But peace was fragile, and Ethan sensed it wouldn't last. One afternoon, while sorting donations at the shelter, Ethan overheard a coworker mention a new volunteer, his father. Shock rooted him in place. Why was he here? To atone or to judge? Ethan avoided the shelter for days, but Caleb urged him to confront the truth. You're not that scared kid anymore, he said, his voice steady. Ethan nodded, steeling himself. He'd face his father, not for approval, but to reclaim his power. The shelter was bustling when Ethan arrived. His father stood in the corner, stacking canned goods, his face weathered but unreadable. Ethan approached, heart racing. Why are you here? He asked, voice low. His father met his eyes, hesitating. I want to understand, he said finally. Lily said you're doing good, helping kids. Ethan didn't trust it. Words were cheap, and his father's history was violence. He left without responding, anger simmering. That night, Ethan told Caleb and Jamie everything. Jamie, now 16, listened intently. He doesn't deserve you, he said, his voice fierce. Ethan hugged him, grateful for the kid who'd become his anchor. But the encounter gnawed at him. Was his father trying, or was this another trap? He couldn't shake the memory of that alley, the rain, the trash. Life pressed on. Ethan and Caleb decided to foster Jamie officially, a step toward permanence. The process was grueling, paperwork, home visits, but they were committed. Jamie smiled when they told him was worth every hurdle. You're my family, he said, voice cracking, and Ethan felt his heart mend a little more. They celebrated with pizza and a bad sci-fi movie, Jamie's laughter echoing through the night. But the past crashed back in. Lily called, frantic. Their father had collapsed at the shelter, a heart attack. He was in the hospital, asking for Ethan. Caleb offered to go with him, but Ethan needed to do this alone. At the hospital, his father looked small, tubes snaking from his arms. I was wrong, he rasped. I see you now. I'm proud. Ethan wanted to believe him, but years of pain held him back. I needed you then, he said, voice steady. Not now. He walked away, tears falling, but his shoulders felt lighter. Back home, Ethan leaned on Caleb, grappling with his father's words. Proud felt hollow after so much hurt. Caleb listened, then said, You don't need his pride. You've got ours. Jamie nodded, sketching quietly in the corner. Ethan realized his family wasn't the one he'd lost. It was the one he'd built. Months later, the fostering process was approved. Jamie was theirs, not just in heart, but on paper. They threw a party, the apartment packed with shelter friends, Caleb's artist buddies, and even Lily, who'd become a quiet ally. Noah toddled around, stealing cake, and Ethan felt a surge of gratitude. This was his life now, messy, full, real. But closure wasn't done. One evening, Ethan found a package on their doorstep. Inside was a photo album, old and worn, with a note from his father. I kept these. I'm sorry. The album held pictures of Ethan as a kid, smiling, carefree, before the world turned cruel. Ethan cried, not for the man his father was, but for the boy he'd been. Caleb held him, promising they'd make new memories. Ethan started volunteering at the shelter again, this time with Jamie. They worked side by side, helping kids find hope. One night, a boy arrived, shivering, kicked out for being trans. Ethan knelt beside him, offering a blanket and a promise. You're not alone. He felt Caleb's hand on his shoulder, Jamie's proud grin beside him. This was his purpose, to break the cycle, to give what he'd once needed. As winter approached, Ethan and Caleb planned a trip, a family vacation with Jamie. They'd rent a cabin, teach Jamie to ski, build snowmen. Ethan looked at his life, his love, his kid, his work, and saw redemption. The alley, the trash, the pain, they were part of him, but they didn't define him. He built something better, something true. Yet one question lingered. Could he ever fully let go of the past, or would it always shadow his future? Winter blanketed Baltimore in soft snow, and Ethan felt a quiet peace. He, Caleb, and Jamie were family now, their bond sealed by love and paperwork. The cabin trip was a week away, and Jamie buzzed with excitement, sketching snowy mountains in his notebook. Ethan watched him, marveling at how far they'd come. But the photo album from his father sat untouched on a shelf, a silent challenge. Could he move forward without facing it? One evening, Ethan opened the album. Each photo, him at 5, blowing out birthday candles, at 10, riding a bike, was a stab of what could have been. Caleb found him, eyes red, and sat close. You don't have to carry this alone, he said. Ethan nodded, but the weight of his father's note, I'm sorry, felt like a debt he didn't want to collect. He closed the album, unresolved. At the shelter, Ethan threw himself into work. The trans teen, Alex was staying with them temporarily, and Ethan saw echoes of his own fear in the boy's eyes. He and Caleb made space, offering Alex a bed and a chance to feel safe. Jamie, now confident, became Alex's friend, sharing art supplies and stories. Ethan watched them, his heart swelling. This was the life he'd fought for, a home where no one was discarded. But the past intruded again. Lily called, her voice shaky. Their father was out of the hospital, but weak, living alone. He asks about you, she said. He's different now. Ethan doubted it. He'd heard different before, felt the sting of empty promises. Still, Lily's plea, he's got no one, tugged at him. Caleb, ever steady, said, you decide what he deserves. Not him. Ethan wrestled with the choice. He didn't owe his father forgiveness, but he wondered if closure was for himself, not the man who'd hurt him. He agreed to meet, this time at a park, neutral ground. His father sat on a bench, frail, a shadow of the man who'd loomed so large. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said, voice low. I just want you to know I see you now. You're a good man. Ethan listened, silent. The words were heavy, sincere, but they couldn't erase the alley, the rain, the trash. I'm glad you see me, Ethan said finally. But I don't need you to. He walked away, not lighter, but freer. Back home, Ethan told Caleb and Jamie everything. Jamie hugged him, fierce and protective. You're my dad, he said, and Ethan's throat tightened. Caleb grinned, pulling them both into an embrace. They were enough, more than enough. The cabin trip loomed, a promise of joy, but Ethan knew he had one more step to take. He returned to the shelter, bringing Alex along. They organized a holiday drive, collecting coats and toys for kids with nowhere to go. Ethan saw his younger self in every face, scared but resilient. He spoke to them, sharing his story, not hiding the pain or the triumph. You're not your past, he told them. You're what you choose to become. Alex, listening, smiled shyly, and Ethan felt a spark of hope. The night before the trip, Ethan and Caleb sat with Jamie and Alex, planning their adventure. The apartment glowed with string lights, the air warm with cocoa and laughter. Ethan looked at his family, chosen, not given, and felt whole. The album still sat on the shelf, but it no longer haunted him. He'd face it one day, maybe, but not now. Now was for living. As they packed for the cabin, a letter arrived from the shelter. A donor, anonymous, had funded a new wing for LGBTQ youth, inspired by Ethan's work. Tears pricked his eyes. Caleb read the letter, then kissed him softly. You're changing the world, he whispered. Ethan shook his head, humble, but he knew he was changing something. Lives, futures, his own heart. The trip was perfect. Snow fell as they skied, Jamie's laughter echoing through the pines. Alex, hesitant at first, joined in, his guarded smile breaking free. Ethan and Caleb stole moments by the fire, their love a quiet strength. Ethan realized he'd built what his parents couldn't, a family rooted in acceptance. The past wasn't gone, but it was smaller, less powerful. One question remained. Could Ethan carry this peace forward, knowing the world still held cruelty for kids like Jamie and Alex? The cabin's warmth lingered in Ethan's heart as they returned to Baltimore. Snow clung to their boots, and Jamie's sketches of the trip filled a new notebook. Alex, still with them, seemed lighter, his trust growing. Ethan and Caleb exchanged glances, knowing they'd opened their home for good. This was their life now, a family forged in love, not blood, built to weather any storm. But Ethan knew the world outside their walls wasn't always kind. Back at the shelter, the new wing was underway, a beacon for kids like Alex and Jamie. Ethan poured himself into it, designing programs, training volunteers. He spoke at a fundraiser, his voice steady as he shared his story. The alley, the rejection, the redemption. The crowd listened, some in tears, and Ethan felt the weight of his impact. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was shaping a future where no kid would sleep beside trash. One spring day, Lily visited with Noah. She'd grown closer, a bridge to the family Ethan had lost. Over coffee, she spoke of their father, now in a care facility, his health fading. He talks about you, she said. He's proud, Ethan. Ethan sipped his coffee, silent. Pride from a man who'd broken him felt like a hollow gift. But Lily's eyes, soft and earnest, held no blame. I'm proud of you too, she said. Ethan hugged her, Noah giggling between them, and felt a piece of his past settle. Caleb's art career soared, his paintings now in galleries across the city. One piece, a vibrant portrait of Ethan and Jamie laughing in the park, hung in their living room. It's us, Caleb said, smiling. Our heart. Ethan kissed him, grateful for a love that anchored him. They were planning a commitment ceremony, nothing grand, just them, Jamie, Alex, and a few friends. A promise to keep building together. But challenges came. Alex faced bullying at school, his trans identity a target. Ethan and Caleb fought for him, meeting with teachers, ensuring support. Jamie stood by Alex, fierce and loyal, reminding Ethan of Caleb's strength. One night, Alex broke down, afraid he'd never belong. Ethan sat with him, sharing his own fears from years ago. "You belong with us," he said. "Always." Alex nodded, tears falling, and Ethan knew they'd get through. The shelter's new wing opened in summer, a bright space with murals painted by Caleb and Jamie. Kids filled it, some scared, some defiant, all needing hope. Ethan watched them, his heart full. He thought of his mother's regret, his father's late apologies, and realized he'd outgrown their shadows. His family, Lily, Noah, Caleb, Jamie, Alex, was proof of that. The commitment ceremony was simple, held in Druid Hill Park where Ethan and Caleb first kissed. Jamie stood beside them, Alex shyly holding flowers. Lily read a poem, her voice trembling with love. As Ethan and Caleb exchanged vows, the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold. "I choose you," Ethan said, his voice thick. "Every day." Caleb smiled, tears in his eyes. "Always." Years later, Ethan stood at the shelter, now a hub for LGBTQ youth across the state. Jamie was in college, studying art, his confidence a testament to their love. Alex, thriving, had found a passion for advocacy, inspired by Ethan's work. Caleb's paintings hung in every room, a reminder of beauty born from struggle. Lily and Noah visited often, their bond with Ethan unbreakable. One day, Ethan received a call. His father had passed, leaving a letter. Ethan opened it alone, expecting pain. Instead, it was simple. "You're the man I couldn't be. Thank you." Ethan folded it, not crying this time. He didn't need his father's words anymore. He had his own. That night, Ethan stood with Caleb on their balcony, the city lights below. Jamie and Alex were inside, laughing over a board game. Ethan leaned into Caleb, feeling the weight of his journey, from an alley to this moment. He'd been kicked out, left beside trash, but he'd returned with a child, a family, a purpose. The world hadn't changed, but he had. And that was enough.